Okay, so you all should be seeing the slides now. This look correct?
Correct. Everything's okay.
All systems go. Okay, we're going to talk about the 7-pillar developer. And this is a conversation about a number of techniques that I found useful throughout my 20+ year career, and lessons that I've also gotten from other people just talking in the trenches throughout the years. And this is a useful conversation if you're somebody that's wanting to radically improve your impact in your career. You want to make more money, you want to have more employees, you want to end up having more direct reports, whatever it may be on that front. So in this conversation, the first question to ask is, who's the first person that comes to mind when you think about success? And what's interesting about this is when you ask yourself this question, different people are going to answer with very different responses. And I think that's interesting because there's really no single idea of what success means, but we do recognize right away the person that comes to mind for you may say something about what your values are. Success is personal, is really my point here. So I'm going to presume, though, that being more successful in your software development career is something that you're interested in, and that your definition of success is going to be writing better software, getting better opportunities, being paid more for it, having more freedom, and so on. But recognize success is really just about accomplishing an aim or a purpose, whatever that may be. It's a pretty broad idea. So I'm assuming that being a better geek will make you more successful. That's the idea here. Now, you're attending this online conference because you're wanting to grow in some way, and we're all moving in some direction. And a change in direction does require energy. So my goal in this little talk is to change your trajectory by changing your systems. Systems can be created, and once those systems are created, then magically things fall into place. The results of our lives are really an outcome of our systems. When I was thinking about the life that I wanted, I came across this quote by Hunter S. Thompson, and I found it really useful. I love this piece in the middle. Decide how you want to live. And that's a weird thing. Like, most of us never sit down one day and say, okay, what life do I really want? It's really easy to fall into the whole thing of, I go to school and I end up somehow picking a degree because, well, that just seemed to make sense, or I fell into this job. But going all the way back and saying, what is the life that I want to live? And then figuring out from there how to make a living doing that. And me, I know how I like to live. I like to learn every day. I love the fact that we learn regularly. I want autonomy. I want to be able to work on my terms. I like variety. That's why I travel around a lot. I want to do work that I believe in, and I want to help others, preferably at scale. So I looked at this list back here, and then I said, okay, what is a career that I could have that would give me all of these things? So what I do is I'm a software consultant. I blog, I tweet, I write courses, I speak at conferences, and I write a lot of code. But this combination as an independent consultant gives me those things that I wanted before. First, decide the life you want to design, and then say, okay, what do I need to do for systems to be able to get to that life? So my life involves, working a lot from hotels, from random beach resorts, sitting by the pool. Yes, even at the beach, I'll take my MacBook out and get some things done, mix a little business with pleasure. It doesn't bother me. I work when I feel like working, and I find that motivates me more. And remote work in particular is something that's an option for an ever-growing number of people, which I think is a wonderful thing. If you haven't tried it, I'd encourage you to experiment with it too. See if you can get an agreement for even partial remote. It's a lot easier to do than it used to be. So in this session, though, we're going to talk about 7 pillars for building a better developer. We're going to start with psychology. So psychology is important because happiness is an advantage. There's a book called The Happiness Advantage, and it really changed my outlook on software, on the way that I lived life. And I saw that getting better at looking for the silver lining is a superpower. It changes your opportunities. And it actually changes the way people look at you too. We know that people are generally drawn to optimists. So being optimistic tends to make you more attractive to other people. It's also important because cortisol is a stress chemical. And if we feel stress, then it reduces creativity, reduces cooperation, hurts digestion, can even lead to diabetes. So there's lots of reasons to try to manage our stress. And stress is at least partially drawn by how we interpret our situations. So instead, we can actually try to build a life where we are fostering happiness chemicals. And that means things like doing exercise. In fact, you'll notice I'm presenting, I'm sure you've noticed, I'm presenting while walking on a treadmill. This is my habit. I walk while I work part of the day. I don't do this all day. That would be brutal, but I do this a little bit each day. And I find that getting more steps, getting more movement, I just feel better. I also like dopamine. So dopamine is given every time you complete a task. And this is part of what's so nice about software development is we complete tasks daily. Every time we merge a pull request or we fix a bug, get something into production, you get this little hit of dopamine, and that encourages more happiness. Serotonin is another important chemical. Every time we help others, me today speaking at this conference, assuming that anybody finds it useful, I get a little bit of serotonin. When we write software that helps other people, we get serotonin. Oxytocin is another chemical. We get it from time with loved ones. So time with family and friends, kids, and so on. So when you think about, okay, I'm not as happy as I'd like to be, it's probably one of these chemicals that are involved. And you can see that there are concrete things that you can do. Go work out, go get something done, help some other people, spend some time with people you love. It's a simple recipe. The warning here, though, is it can get addictive. I, for instance, really love completing tasks, so I sure seem to love dopamine. And another thing in this area is avoiding wasting time poorly. Absolutely, everybody should waste time, but waste it well. Wasting time poorly is sitting around doom scrolling on Twitter, for instance. This is something I've struggled with in the past. And in this area, it's helpful to have a simple mantra, which is if someone asks me to do something, it's either hell yeah or no. If I want to do this thing, and if I don't really want to do it, then just pass. Another thing in this area is to be productive about your procrastination. If you don't feel like working, at least do something that moves you sort of in that direction. So that's first pillar, psychology. Second pillar, focus. Now, focus is something that's obvious when you look at a lot of people who are standouts. When you look at pro athletes, when you look at professional comedians, you know that they've spent a massive amount of time focused on that one thing, and they've sacrificed a lot of other things to get there. And you can find this all over the place in life. So this is me at the gym. And this is a guy named Meth. I walked up to him while he was working out because I saw the guy just was huge. And I asked him, okay, how did you get to this point? How are you this big? And I contrast here on the slide, his life versus my life. Like me, I'm going to the gym 30 minutes, maybe an hour of working out. I eat a normal 3 meals a day, no real strict diet, whereas he's working out 2 hours, 6 days a week. He eats 4 meals a day, and his fourth meal of the day is something he doesn't even want to eat. It's eating more food because he's got to get enough calories into his diet to feed his muscles to stay that big. So there's absolutely a level of focus in his life in this area that manifests like visually for everybody. It's not magic. He's bigger because he's focused on this particular thing, and I'm just not focused at that same level. And I bring this up because a conference like this is going to mention all sorts of things that you don't know. And it's important to recognize that you can't possibly keep up with all of this. We know that Batman isn't real. There's no one that can actually go fight crime and be the handsome billionaire philanthropist and run a successful business and so on. It's an interesting fantasy, but in the real world, what we have to do is aim for something more realistic, which is to think of ourselves as something unique, remarkable. And Seth Godin talks about this in his book, Purple Cow, of having this goal of being remarkable. And we can do that by specializing, by choosing something interesting in a narrow field. Jeff Atwood said the path to being smart isn't reliable success, or he said that being smart isn't a reliable path to success. What is becoming borderline obsessive about one thing. And that's something that a software developer can certainly do. You basically get to choose how you want to be weird. And years ago, I decided that I wanted to be weird in my own way, and I just chose to go really deep on front-end development, pick a single technology, which was React. And over the last many years, I've had a lot of success by being a React specialist. But there's tons of specializations that you can consider here. When you look at this list, recognize that even these aren't particularly niche specializations. You can go deeper inside of them. Like my current Venn diagram is this combination of React with modern web ecosystem. I'm teaching automated testing. I'm helping accelerate developers. I'm helping companies that are transitioning over to using React. And also, I only really focus on web. I don't do much on mobile native. So I'm very focused in a particular area, and that makes me pretty valuable for the people that happen to be looking for someone like me. Now, this is the question that you have to ask yourself if you really want to make a bigger impact. I want to be exceptional at. How would you answer that? And the thing is, if you can answer this, then so can others most likely. If you're doing this well, like most of my friends, most of my friends at conferences or coworkers at different places would know what I want to be exceptional at because they can see my focus in that area. It's quite obvious. And a book that I found really useful in this area was a book called Essentialism. Essentialism said, how can I decide what do I want to go big on? I needed to stop asking, how could I do it all? Because we can't do it all, but choose something to go big on. And once you do that sort of thing, you can have amazing results. Gary Vee said, if you want to be an anomaly, you've got to act like one. So you've got to find that thing where you really want to be exceptional. This specialization, especially in modern development, is a necessity because there's way too much to keep up on. And this is a very partial list of the sorts of things that I feel like I need to know in my little niche, but recognize that I still don't know as much as I want to know about this list. And this is even just a partial list of the things that I'd like to know better. Even CSS, as simple as styling, it's thousands of things that you might need to know. So there are people that specialize in CSS. There are even people that specialize in little areas of CSS, like I am the animation specialist, for instance, or I'm the accessibility specialist. These sorts of things are very, very deep areas that you could dig into. So I'll share a little example here about focus and the impact of it. So this is just broadly a picture of my career and all the technologies I've worked with over a couple of decades since the late 90s. And if I present myself this way, it's not very useful because people can't really figure out what to do with me. And in fact, I tried to do just this. Years ago, I created a website and I was trying to get business as a consultant. Now, at the time, I had a full-time job, but I was still pulling in some business on the side by speaking a little bit at conferences. But the problem was I was basically marketing myself as a person that had worked in a bunch of stuff. But the problem is people don't really Google or look around for a developer that happens to be okay at a bunch of different things. They tend to look for somebody that's good, really good, like world-class good at a few things. That's what makes a consultant really valuable, and that's what makes people hunt them down. So what I did was I changed the way that I was marketing myself, and I realized, okay, I really just want to be known for being really good at React, being really good at JavaScript. Like that's an area where I could go quite deep. So what I did was I set up a website, reactjsconsulting.com. This single website that I set up years ago has made me more money than I think anything that I've ever done, because it finally created a funnel for people to find someone who was very specific, who was focused on a single area, who was really good at helping companies move over and improve their velocity in a particular technology. So I want to show you the results here. 2016, when I was doing the old strategy where I was a generalist, there were 3 companies that reached out to me and I completed those 3 projects. Well, fast forward 2 years later, when I started marketing myself as a React specialist and I was really focused on that area, I had 45 companies reach out to me and I finished 15 of those. And keep in mind, at that time, I was still holding down a full-time job too. So it was bananas busy. I had to say no to a bunch of stuff. And I actually quit my job in 2018 because of the success of this experiment of trying it on the side. And I've been enjoying life as an independent since. I have never once been bored. I've never once had a week where I had nothing to do. I feel very lucky, but I do think that a lot of this comes down to the idea of focus, of picking something that made me unique. A woodpecker has to go peck on a tree perhaps 20,000 times just to get dinner. If a woodpecker went around and pecked 100 times on 100 different trees, they get nothing. And that's the risk of a developer today, is learning just a little bit about a lot of things, but never becoming truly great at those things. So you really do have to ask, what would people Google for to find you? If you want to be really remarkable, it's helpful to figure out what that would be. And this isn't really about appearances or ego. It's really just about having a focus in a particular area. That's what I would encourage. So that's pillar 2. Pillar number 3 is education. Now, education is important because knowledge tends to double over time. In medicine, it doubles every 87 years. In math, 63, chemistry, 35, genetics, 32, JavaScript every 10 months or so. It goes like crazy. Very difficult to keep up with these things. If you get an engineering degree today, the half-life of the knowledge that you learn is 2.5 to 5 years, which means half of everything that you learned during your engineering degree has now fallen out of favor, has now been replaced, because engineering just moves that quickly. So the response to this is you really do have to embrace daily learning, and it helps to have a growth mindset. A lot of us have a fixed mindset in areas like you might have heard yourself say this of, I'm just not funny, or I'm not an artist, or I have bad penmanship, whatever it may be. Well, a growth mindset says, if something is hard, I need to keep pushing, because success is about hard work, not talent. Yes, there's an aspect of talent, especially if I want to go be a professional athlete. But as far as software development goes, a large portion of success is really just about recognizing that, yes, it's going to be hard for a while, but I have to keep practicing and pushing. And I have found that caring is a strategic advantage, that the more you can care about your task and what you're doing, the more that you can become a standout. So there's this little cycle I want to share here, that if you care more than the average person, you're going to be dedicated at a higher level. And that dedication will lead to mastery. When you master a task, then you're going to be trusted to do it. And that trust is going to lead to autonomy, as in, we're going to trust you to do it, and we're going to let you decide how to do it. We'll let you decide when to do it. And I know this because this is my life today. Like, I get to solve big, hard problems, and I get to do it on my schedule, on my time frame. And I'm trusted to do it on my own, often in many cases, because it all started, though, with me finding something that I cared about more than most people would. So you have to start with caring more and finding that thing that you can really go deep on. There's a wonderful book by Callum Newport that talks about this as well, that competence creates passion. In fact, the odd thing is I didn't want to do software development at first, but going into software development, taking it seriously, I found the better that I got at it, the more passionate I felt about it, the more it became part of my identity. And to get to this level, it's really helpful to think about, okay, what information's coming into my head each day? Because it used to be the old power was about having access to data, but now we all have access to data. It's really now a matter of knowing what to ignore, knowing what to focus on. Because Sturgeon's law says about 90% of everything is crap. And there's perhaps some truth here. Maybe even applies to this talk. We'll see. Parts of it may be good. So what I do, I actually answer questions out on an AMA repository out on GitHub. And one of the things I answered there was my information stream. So if you want to see how I keep up, I've shared the mailing lists I subscribe to and various other information strategies there. But it helps to figure out how you want to learn, and it tends to be a combination of all these things. I also don't hesitate to pay others for help, to take paid courses, to pay consultants, and so on. But it's also important to get good at teaching yourself. And teaching yourself comes down to some simple principles like the Feynman technique, where, excuse me, you can tell that you actually understand a topic if you can explain it like you're talking to a 5-year-old. You learn it by teaching yourself. You write the concept, create kid-level explanations, and then identify gaps in your knowledge. I also encourage you to try to learn one thing at a time. I found learning 2 things at a time can be more confusing. Another thing that's useful is having a system for how that data is processed and stored. So think about the internet as this big haystack. And what you need is, when you find something useful, put it into your smaller haystack so that you can find that needle at a later time. There's lots of ways to do this: Evernote, Notion, GitHub Gist. I actually use a combination of all 3 of these. But the fact is, like me, I even use Twitter. If I see something useful, I'll tweet it out, and then I know later I could go search by Twitter and I'll find some tweet where I talked about it. But you can, I like to store quotes, article summaries, book, conference notes, cat gifs, whatever you're into, but make it easy to get your hands on this information later. Pillar number 4 is image. So in other fields, image is a particularly big deal, like having the impressive degree, but in software development, you don't necessarily have to have a degree. In other fields, how you dress might be important. And in software, well, we're not real worried about that. You can wear a hoodie, wear whatever you want to. There are very famous people that have worn hoodies. And in fact, a lot of us now, well, we spend our lives just in sort of an inverted story here, where some of the most successful developers are actually just, wearing old t-shirts, getting things done, not a big worry about it. I will say I dress strategically on this front. I tend to dress for comfort most days, but on some days, if I want to feel more confident, I might wear a collar. Like today I'm speaking, so hey, put on a collared shirt. The reason this image thing is important, though, is I am who I think you think I am. So my assumption about how you look at me impacts how I look at myself. So if I think that you look at me as a leader or as somebody who's got it together, then I feel a little bit better. And that's why how we dress, how we carry ourselves, and the things that we do change our public image. And in fact, speaking at a conference is one of the best ways to change your self-image, because you go, okay, these people came into the room, they chose my session over some other session. They're assuming they're going to learn something from me. So I must be the type of person that is going to be helpful to them. And that creates a positive image in your own head. It can help you get over some of your own struggles about imposter syndrome by showing up and delivering. So it's helpful to do these things in public: learn, write, teach, code, speak. All these things can be done in public. Learning in public. Use tools like Twitter, like LinkedIn, GitHub. Go ahead and blog, post on Stack Overflow, create a podcast or go on one. Consider writing a book, maybe do a video course. And also, when you do these things, share pictures, put things out on social media, create a record of it all. And you might think that this is about ego, but it's not about ego. It's really about opportunity, that you have to get your name out there. You have to increase your Lux surface area. So to improve your image, think about your Lux surface area as this tangible thing. And the way you increase your Lux surface area is increasing the number of people that know what you are great at. So me speaking today at this conference, that increases my Lux surface area, because now a few more people might have heard of me, know that I specialize in React, that I'm a consultant, and maybe later they'll reach out. So you help people, and along the way, maybe some of these bottles you threw out in the ocean will float back to you again. Pillar number 5 is communication. Now, the stereotype of developers is that we're lousy communicators. It's a silly stereotype, developers of all types out there. But one thing that you'll notice is experts tend to ask the right questions. They tend to say a lot of things like, it depends. You will notice that an expert, instead of answering a question, will tend to respond with more questions. They want to look at the context. That's an important foundation for communication, is recognizing that I need to seek first to understand. Another important piece of communication is sales. And I love the book To Sell is Human, because Daniel Pink says we're all selling ideas. So every pull request that I open is me selling an idea to the rest of my team. I'm saying, here's a code change that I think we should make. And part of whether my code gets merged depends on how good I am at selling the rest of the team on my idea, on conveying it, on executing it, and also on selling it. Same story with my boss. Years ago, when I wanted to work remote, I had to sell my boss on that idea. So to get the life I wanted, I needed to be persuasive. I had to learn how to be better at sales. And now as an independent, I'm in sales every day. People come to me with issues and I have to sell them that I'm the person that can help them. Another useful mindset in communication is thinking about having a discussion rather than an argument. Think about the two of us trying to find truth within a tricky issue rather than us fighting on opposite sides, joining arms, having a conversation. I also encourage having taboo conversations. And by that, I mean, go ahead, talk about politics, talk about religion, talk about money, talk about tabs versus spaces if you really want to fight. These are actually useful. And in fact, when I started going to conferences, I realized I was around other people who were comfortable talking about these things. And I learned some wild stuff. I learned how much other people were making. I learned how much software developers were charging as independents. I got to greatly increase my rates because I found out I was way undercharging, but I didn't know that until I had a conversation about some of these taboo topics. So you might think too that in an argument, you really try to decide who is right. Well, sure, but you don't have to have an argument at all. You can have a discussion, and a discussion is when you and other people are trying to decide what is right. So if you sense that you're in an argument, you might just be wasting your time. It's often pretty clear that you're in a situation where the person on the other side is not interested in changing their mind. They're not necessarily looking for truth. They're looking to win. And it's much more helpful if you have conversations with people that are truly trying to join with you in search for truth. And a way to do this is to try to keep your identity small, because you don't want to be the person that is so grounded in their current views that they're not willing to change. Like me, I often will say, hey, I'm a React developer, but what I really should think of is I currently specialize in React. And that's useful because it's not really part of my identity. It's something that I do at the moment, but at some point I'm going to move on to the next hot thing, whatever that is. So I avoid keeping it as part of my identity so that I can see when something better comes along that I should switch to. Feynman said, I'd rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. So be willing to question your current views and be willing to realize there might be a better technology, a better pattern, better solution that works in some other contexts. I encourage you to talk about money, but not with coworkers. That tends to create certain other problems, but talking about it at a conference, talking about it among other friends outside of your company can be eye-opening and empowering. And I remember back when I was working as a waiter, making around $2 an hour. I had no idea what to charge, and a local government entity actually came to me when I was in college, asked me to build a site for them. I had no idea what I should charge them, but I ended up blurting out $850 and built their site. It took me forever. I did 2 months of work, and after taxes, I had $650 to show for it. I mean, hilarious. I had no idea about money though. I hadn't really talked to anyone yet. I didn't know what a software developer could charge. When you're at a conference or at other events, I encourage you to sit with people that you don't know. This really intimidated me at first, but I learned to get better at it over time. Ask, may I join you? People are usually happy to have you join them. Ask where people are from, what they work in, if they've been to good sessions. These are easy things to do at conferences. Now, I also have noticed, I think there's a fair number of software developers that have a negative view of networking. And there's nothing wrong with networking as long as you're not like sneaky or manipulative. My networking rule is simple. I'm just going to be real, and I'm going to network with people that I like. I network with the people who I just happen to click with, and I don't expect anything in return. I really look at networking as me making more friends, and every once in a while something comes from that. So by going to conferences, I've made all sorts of friends over the years. I really enjoyed the experiences, taken some bad pictures. And a book on this front that I found useful was How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's got kind of a silly title, but if I were to sum it up, it's really be genuinely interested in other people, ask questions, get to know them, get them talking about the things that they're excited about, and you will truly get to know somebody, and you'll also learn a lot of new things along the way. And when you meet somebody who you genuinely respect, be candid about that. You don't have to gush and go too far, but tell them that you really liked this thing that they did. I'd encourage you to speak. Speaking at conferences can absolutely change your career. It forces you to go deeper. And it's also a funny thing, like a lot of public speaking does not pay a dime, but in the second order, it absolutely does. So like I'll speak at conferences quite often. I don't get paid for the most part at many of these conferences, but the opportunities that come from that do pay. So a company comes in later and says, hey, we want you to come in and do corporate training. Well, that does. So there's a second level thinking going on here. And that's just one example of it. In fact, there's a lot of other examples. Like speaking at a conference forces me to learn, improves my confidence. I make friends. I get into the conference for free. I often get flown across the world for free. And I also get this free consulting from other conference attendees, which is pretty awesome. Like standing out in the hallway, getting to talk to people that have written some of the software that I use every day, getting their insights on how I'm using it. And also I just find the whole thing inspiring, like being around people that care about their craft at that level. If you decide to go into speaking, start with a lunch and learn, start local, then do a local meetup, maybe do a code camp, try a regional conference, and then ultimately you could do international conferences. You could get paid to fly around the world and share your ideas. It's a pretty amazing life. And it's wild because like when it comes to public speaking, that's one of the most common fears. In fact, the top two are public speaking and death. So Jerry Seinfeld points this out, that if you are at a funeral and you're delivering the eulogy, then that means that you'd actually rather be in the ground. And that's absurd. It's not that scary. Like you can get over this. And once you do, the world gets bigger. It's wonderful. I look at speaking, I look at writing software, I look at creating courses as art. And I've found that I rarely look back and say that I'm disappointed that I made it. I definitely have looked back and said I made a mistake. There's been talks that I knew could have been better. There's been software that I wrote that could have been better, but I have rarely looked back and wished I hadn't done it. It was a lesson along the way. Okay, pillar number 6 is time, which is a funny time for this to pop up because I've got just a little bit of time left here. So you've probably heard we all have the same 24 hours in the day. Well, that's not really true because money buys time in lots of different ways. I can pay somebody to mow my yard or to clean my house or to fix a problem. I can actually pay for a faster lane on the highway. I can pay someone else to drive me around. I could pay a valet to go park my car. I could pay a pilot to fly me around the world. I can pay money to jump in line. I can even pay to have a bed up in the air. Yes, that is an actual plane. It's unbelievable. You have your own little room if you got enough money. Money also buys mental bandwidth. So if you have enough money, then you can automate all your payments. You don't really have to even worry about them. Just have it go. So buying mental bandwidth is things like this: auto paying your bills, eliminating your debt, living beneath your means, moving to a quiet neighborhood. All these things give you more mental bandwidth. And the risk is, as a software developer, is we tend to make good money, and that money tends to grow over time as we get better. But the risk is continually elevating our lifestyle rather than buying time. And if you buy time, what you'll find is you can actually compound the quality of your life, because now time is the essence of life. And if you can pay some other people to do things that they're good at, that you might not be as good at, that frees you up to get better at your career. It's helpful to think about the future more, not overly so. Futuropia is the term for that, where you're intensely future oriented. If you go too far, then you never really enjoy the present. This is something that honestly I've struggled with. But being future oriented tends to help you make good decisions for the future. So there's a study that even found this, that people at the lowest socioeconomic level tend to focus on only the next few hours because they have to figure out very simple things like, how am I going to eat my next meal? Whereas people at the highest level, they're thinking about where the market is moving. They're thinking about the next investment to make, maybe the next real estate to buy. They're thinking years ahead. And as software developers, we can slowly move in that direction of thinking farther ahead by buying time, by creating systems that free up our mental bandwidth. And the thing is, like, all of us as humans end up spending some amount of time on most of these items on the page, but you can't only change one thing. So when you decide to go big on one area, like say your job, your career, some of these other areas are going to have to be sacrificed to some degree. So one way around this, though, is to try to multi-thread your life. In other words, accomplish multiple things at the same time, like listening to audiobooks while you're driving, or learning while you're working out, or, you know, playing with your kids. You're getting exercise and you're having fun playing with them at the same time. Okay, last pillar, systems. Systems are preferable to goals because goals have an endpoint and systems do not. Goals require willpower. Systems don't. Goals are all or nothing. Systems are not. Goals limit your upside. Systems do not. So these are all systems that relate to the pillars that we just talked about: speaking, writing, teaching, having habitual optimism, buying time, not stuff, trying to multi-thread your life. What I've really shared in this whole talk here is a bunch of systems that will help you improve your software development career. So this book, How to Fail at Anything and Still Win Big, really boils down success to defining what it means to you, figuring out the price you need to pay, and then paying it. That encourages you to think about then, okay, I need to pay it. What is the system that I need to set up? So my focus is to grow developers. And the way that I do that is I have this system of perpetual forward motion. I'm trying to learn every day, build stuff, and share what I'm doing. So I want to share just a bit of what went on during 6 years of probably the most intense part of my career. 33 talks, 50 conferences, 135 conference sessions, 50 plus blog posts, 50 podcasts. I published 9 courses on Pluralsight, 30 hours of programming videos. It was a crazy 6-year period. In 2018, which was my peak of travel, I did 21 trips, 74 days, 33,000 miles, 27 cities, 4 countries. It was bananas. And I have kids. Like, it was too much. And I'm sharing this because it's also a cautionary tale that you can go too far. And I certainly did. Like, just to create one course on Pluralsight, it was 6 months of me, no TV, no sports, no news, no games. I hardly saw friends and family. Like, I was just locking myself in the room trying to get through this. It was brutally difficult. And good things came out of it. Like, in the end, I get to speak more. Lots of people watch my courses, which is great. But I bring this up because it is illogical to envy others. You can always look around and find somebody more successful than you, whatever you want to define as success, but you do not know the price they paid. There are sad, sad stories of so many people that have reached too far, that have gone and created a life that was imbalanced and then lost their family, lost their children. And that's obviously not attractive if you can avoid it. So I share this because I'm just being candid that I over-indexed on this stuff. There's also a conversation about balance in here that's important, of saying, okay, part of success for me too is living a balanced life. So figure out what that means to you. Okay, so let's wrap up. We talked about 7 pillars, and I know that you probably won't act on just a vague desire. You need to change a system. So what I would encourage you to do is put a reminder in your calendar. Add one thing to your calendar based on what we talked about in here. And maybe that's to go grab an audiobook, like pick one of the books I mentioned, or maybe it's to change one particular thing. Maybe join the gym or go to the library, find a book, pick a topic, niche down, lots of options here, but I'd encourage you to pick one. There's also a repository that I created that has some of these key points here, also a link to the slide deck that I've covered in here. I have a course on Pluralsight called Becoming an Outlier. You can find that on my course site. Go to pluralsight.com. You can search for me. I'm Cory House. You'll find my courses. I have others out there on React, JavaScript, not surprisingly. That's my focus. Also some out there on C#. But I'd encourage you to ask again, what is success to you? And also, I want to be remarkable at what? That's the core question to try to answer. So I'm Cory House. You can find me on Twitter at HouseCore. I tweet about software development every day. My courses are on pluralsight.com. And if you're interested in consulting or training, I am at reactjsconsulting.com. That's my talk. Hope you all enjoy the conference. Thanks for having me.